Welcome to the Left of Str8 Show, where we talk entertainment, music, books, foodies, and more each week with special guest interviews of interest to the LGBTQ community and our straight allies. Direct from the entertainment capital of Northeast Ohio. Your host, Scott Fullerton, chats with some of your favorite entertainers, celebrities, newsmakers, and behind-the-scenes people across the country and around the world who make it all happen. So sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and let's start talking.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to Left of Str8 Show. I'm your host, as always, Scott Fullerton. I am so happy to bring you another interview of interest to our LGBTQ listeners and, of course, our wonderful straight allies. My next guest messaged me about becoming a guest on the show, and I'm so happy he did. He's a self-described social media marketing maven, celebrity content liaison, founder of Anchors to Dusk Publishing, and an Amazon best-selling author himself with 2 titles in the queer horror genre under his belt. He also talks about how writing has helped him come through internalized homophobia and how discussing it helps in talking about many aspects of adulting as us gay people try to include meeting new friends and what being a powerful ally and what change means. So that's kind of exciting here. We're going to get into it now, and I want you to big a big welcome to the show, Mr. Joseph Federico. Joseph, how's it going, buddy?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Scott. This is really exciting. I appreciate it.
Well, I am excited to have you on. Thank you for your patience. We have had mojo technical difficulties getting this done, so we're going to see if this works okay for us. So glad you got a hold of me on social media. I love myself a little social media, and very interesting story you have, my friend. So thanks for taking the time to share your story with my listeners.
Of course. Again, it's an honor being here. So I'm an open book, Scott.
There you go. All right, well, let's start from the beginning since it is your first time here on the show. Let's go ahead and give my listeners a little bit of background. Talk about where you grew up, what kind of a kid were you, and what kind of brought you into writing? Is it something you always wanted to do, or let's go there first?
Sure. So I grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey. I lived there over 25 years. It was a bougie town. I was very blessed to have been, raised the way I was, but it was the late 80s, early 90s, up to the early 2000s, before I moved, and I grew up as a teenager. They were a very Republican centric town, and they were not very accepting of the LGBT or even people of color. Again, storybook town, but it certainly hindered me growing up, and I was ashamed of who I was, and I had to hide behind a beard and going on dates with women, with girls in high school and middle school, and but I would, I would fawn after the football players and the boys, in my class. So it was a great upbringing, but I definitely turned to writing eventually to work through the trauma that I felt that I, experienced, growing up in a town like that in the 90s and early 2000s. And when it comes to horror, I essentially have always been a horror fan.
Nice.
My first newspaper article, if you will, was around Christmas time, and there was, I'm going to date myself, 1988, 1989, this special came out on some news channel, maybe like a Barbara Walters or such, and it was about Swamp Thing, which is, a horror character that was big in the 80s and 90s, and meaning Santa Claus or something. And
Right.
I was so inspired, I wrote my first news article covering how they met. And I published it on some newspapers, some Crayola paper I had in my art bin, some magic markers. But I've always been a fan of Stephen King. I've always been a fan of R.L. Stine. Really big inspirations to me as I was, growing up back then. And writing to this day has really helped me, is still helping me work through my issues. to,
Nice. Yeah.
to put it lightly, Scott. Yeah. So
That's pretty self-aware, actually. A lot of people, hear people talk about journaling and things like that, but a lot of people don't understand how it really can help you get your feelings together. It's a form of personal therapy to yourself before you know what therapy even is, right?
absolutely. And I had no idea. Again, we were a family that didn't really talk about your feelings, our feelings. And my town was just, you had to act a certain way. You had to put a mask on pretty much every time you went out. So I internalized that as well. And I looked to horror because it was essentially fantasy, but also to my writing and also horror movies for inspiration. So
Gotcha. Now, I told you horror's not my genre. I can appreciate it, but I don't like to jump in front of people. When I was younger, I kind of like thinking of internalized homophobia. When I saw, and I won't date me, but I saw My Bloody Valentine back in the day, because I am old. But when I saw that, I grabbed onto my best friend's hand, this guy. And so I'd like, and it freaked me out because I wasn't out or anything. It was high school or whatever it was. And
mhm.
it's like, so it was like almost internalized homophobia. I didn't want to jump and be scared or look to another guy if I was weird or kind of unmasculine for being scared at a horror show. So,
Absolutely. And if you're talking about the original film, one of the best horror movies are for Valentine's Day, hands down.
mm. I think I saw that, and I think I saw Halloween before I said that's enough. Don't need to see any more of those unless I
That's it.
absolutely had to. So now, you talked about the one, was that Adrian Barbeau that was in Swamp Thing?
I honestly forget. I
I
want to say
forget
yes, but
too.
this was like late 80s, early 90s, Scott. So
That's masking right there too. Adrian Barbeau has Baba Boom back in the day, so
pretty
definitely.
much, pretty much.
I love it. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about being gay then. When did you first come out to yourself? Who was maybe the first person you told? And when do you think you finally found your tribe?
You know what? Wow. And I'm gonna get probably emotional. I don't mean to be, but um, becoming your truest, most authentic self is a journey. And I think, especially as, I mean, in the LGBTQIA plus community, and I say that because I have sibling, not siblings, but nibblings that are part of the spectrum. I myself am a queer man. I'm trying to be more respectful of the entire community. But when
Right.
I came out, I knew from an early age that I was attracted to boys in my class or my gym teachers, for instance. Sounds strange, but it was a different time. Nothing ever happened, but I knew I was different.
Right.
And I actually came out to my mom first when I started having strange feelings of being attracted to my gym teacher in like 1994 ish. And I came out to my mom, and it was a very hush hush conversation. Let's not tell your father. And it was kind of laughed at. Just, oh, it's a joke. It's a phase. So I internalized that, and I went back in the closet proverbially, and sorry, I dropped the phone. um, that was difficult, but I kind of shoved it away. Dated girls all through middle school and high school, and even up to early college. And I came out officially to my friends when I was 19 as bisexual. I wasn't ready um, to cross that bridge fully into saying that I was gay,
Right.
because it was safer. It was a beard. I can, still maybe hook up with boys on campus, for instance, but I would be dating women, and I came out to friends and family when I was 21.
Mm.
And that was my 21st birthday when I officially was tired of hiding who I was, and I couldn't take it pretty much anymore, and I came out, which was an interesting. We all have our own coming out story, not
Right.
woe is me, but every coming out story is different, to everyone. And in regards to finding my tribe, I never found my tribe with other gay men as friends, in those platonic relationships. I went to clubs with the other gays, the A gays, and we would all go dancing together and have drinks and hang out and go to parties um, for years. But I never really found my tribe, honestly, until last summer when
Really?
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to finding my tribe when it comes to other gay men, um, but I found my gay best friend on Facebook. We started chatting randomly, and I was his life coach actually for a while. So that helped
Nice.
me um, be truer to myself, as I was also in therapy, for myself, trying to be a better human being, a better man, knowing I had things on the horizon I was excited about. New business adventures, new books coming out. I had to work through my own, what. But I was also helping uh, who became my eventual, very close gay best friend. And then he started dating his boyfriend a few months after we started talking. A few months after that, we had deeper conversations to bring our boyfriends into the friendship and the relationship, and the rest they say is history. So the tribe was found pretty much almost a year ago, which is crazy to even admit or say, but I'm happy it happened.
Exactly. I mean, it's a journey to get there. When you get there, you celebrate it, no matter how long it takes, right?
Exactly. But it took so long, But again, there's no, time is a social construct, and there's no rush on finding a relationship or love or even close friendships.
Right.
So
Well, I think I saw you on another interview say that you've been with your partner for quite a few years now. So at least you had that connection with somebody. You didn't have an entire tribe, but you still had that LGBTQ connection with your partner, right?
sure, we're going on 18 years, Scott. So
Wow.
absolutely, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That is awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right, well, let's talk about that a little more in general, besides just ourselves here. Let's talk about a gay in the life, so to speak. Overcoming that internalized homophobia. What have you kind of found are coping mechanisms, and how do you kind of deal with that personally, and how do you share that with other people?
Sure. To be honest, I'm very open. I'm an open book, as I said. Um, I hid who I was for most of my young adult life because I felt that I had to. Um, Now, yeah, my old town, which was in Ridgewood, New Jersey, um, is a lot different than when I left it. Of course, times change, but they have pride events now, and the school is more inclusive. The high school and middle schools, which I'm very happy about. I mean, I wish it happened when I was there, um, but I really turned to my writing. I really turned to a lot of my girlfriends, my girl, friends, not in
Sure.
a romantic sense, as I think most of us gay men do. We gravitate towards females that we feel safe around, and we can
Right.
share the girlfriend experience with, because we're safe too around. They feel safe around us, I believe. Um, so I would definitely say the writing and honestly going to therapy for over 2 years has definitely helped me become uh, truer to myself, more authentic, feeling the masculine when I feel masculine, feeling the feminine when I feel feminine, and not being ashamed of that. If I want to wear something or act a certain way, go out, you know what I mean? But also being a life coach for a few months definitely helped me also kind of put the mirror up to myself and ask who I really was and why was I doing this to assist other gay men. Prior to meeting my friend, I had a client. I also run a social media agency, and it kind of evolved with this other gentleman that was struggling with his weight and his self esteem, and we evolved from working on his social media strategy and his PR to helping him become a life coach. He left this abusive relationship. He lost weight. He was working out. His business was more successful because he was truer to himself. So that's where the life coaching kind of came into play. Was an evolution of starting my own agency with social media, but other gay men that needed my help and needed somebody to turn to, which I
That's
felt
great.
very strongly about because I never had had that. Which then evolved into meeting my new friend that also needed assistance, and it was we weren't sure where the relationship was going. Was it a client patient, or were we going to become friends? So I get back from Myrtle Beach, which is like a second home to me. My family has a place with my boyfriend for 2 weeks, and he and I had a conversation where we needed to hammer out essentially where our friendship was going, and we agreed that we needed another girlfriend, another gay friend in each other's lives, and it evolved from there. Which that relationship and the four of us, including our boyfriends, the men in our lives, really has exceeded expectations for the
That's very
last,
cool.
since last October when we all met. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Well, let's talk about for a minute. We're going to go into the books in just a little bit, but I want to
Sure.
talk about this. I mean, you're a founding CEO. It's a boutique marketing firm. It's called Anchor's Desk Publishing. You cover social media, content creation for Facebook, Twitter, public relations management systems. You also work with lesser known and first time authors, which I think is awesome. So let's talk social media for a second because I personally suck at it. And it is the golden age of social media, as we know, with influence and everything happening.
Sure is.
Um,
Yep.
do you ever see a bubble coming, or do you see this thing just kind of riding on and on and on? Or where do you see the status of social media right now? And is there a drop off point ever?
You know what? First of all, how much time do you have? I can speak social media for not even hours, but days and weeks, because that's my wheelhouse. That's my bread and butter.
Right.
I have to learn the trends before I even sell the services. And I'm more of a coach. I've evolved into being more of a coach in regards to PR and social media for reels, namely on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Business pages, celebrities, and small business owners. There is no bubble. There has been an evolution since COVID hit. Um, there was the rise and fall of the influencer essentially during, pre-COVID. Everybody also thought that they were the influencer. Look at me, I'm posting my Starbucks or my sandwich or I'm on a trip. That shifted because everybody had to tie it back to my own story, look to themselves during COVID and really apply uh, lessons, whether they were difficult or easy for everyone that was that were under lockdowns. Um, they took on hobbies. They took on more of a responsibility to themselves and turned to social media as the mirror to really, I believe, find themselves. So we went from the influencer marketing to a more authentic voice kind of during and post COVID, where we want to be coddled. The consumer, the viewer, the person that's viewing your content is looking to feel comfortable, not only through nostalgia marketing, where we go back to a certain place in time in our minds we felt safe and comfortable and fun and loved and accepted, but we need as content creators, namely, to show our true authentic selves. And that's the current trend. We don't want the yachts or the boats or the fancy vacations. We want a
Right.
human experience on the other end, talking to you or talking to me or talking to each other in order to grow your business essentially going forward. So
Oh, that's
that's the
fantastic.
trend, is the true authentic self on social media across all the platforms. And that trend's
Oh,
not going away anytime soon.
nice. I love that. And I think that's very true. I think we're all looking for authenticity. It's been a buzzword for a while, and I'm glad to see this playing out so much in social media.
Sure.
That's, I think, one tip is to be authentic self. What do you think are maybe three of the biggest mistakes people are making right now? And if they wanted to kind of get better, where do you think they should research how to get better?
You know what? I would start on Instagram. I wouldn't go to TikTok. That's not for everybody. I wouldn't go to Facebook. If you want to advertise, that's kind of dying out with Meta, and Meta is not the best platform right now. I would certainly start with Instagram. It's a plug and play platform, but don't post. One of the biggest mistakes I see with clients or future clients or people looking that feel lost, a celebrity, for instance, maybe promoting a show, or a real estate agent, or even the insurance agents out there, don't post static images. They're going to land flat on their face. Unfortunately, it's fun. It's easy. You take your phone out. We all have a camera in our pockets 24/7. Don't do that. Get yourself on camera. I will say, when I started, actually right before COVID hit, February 2020, there was this thing called IGTV, and it was your own television
Remember that?
program through the Instagram platform. And my engagement rate for myself, I always try to look to myself first, try the new trend before I, again, sell my services or coach a client that feels completely lost
Right.
uh, in the woods of social media. My engagement rate on social were only static images, 8% per week. That's pretty low. And I wasn't really tracking metrics until we really knew we had to track metrics in order to confirm our content was working, right? The ROI. I got myself on camera. I started talking about marketing, my history, my journey as the marketing maven. My engagement rate grew 300% in 6 days just by getting on camera. So there's a method to my madness, and numbers never lie. So don't post static images, number one. Number two, be as authentic as possible. And number three, post with intent. Always tie it back to your brand or your products or your services.
Very good advice. Thank you for that.
Of course.
I also want to talk about for a second something that's kind of interesting to me on social media. It's kind of cashing in on your looks, so to speak. We have a lot of young, good-looking people out there doing things like OnlyFans and private, just doing these lives to try to get people to click through, doing lives and things like that. What do you think is the long-term effect on that? It just seems like these guys are making bank now. I mean, I see people making thousands and thousands of dollars a month, but do you see a long-term consequence for it, or is it just going to have to play out before we see more what's going to happen?
That's a great question. I've actually never been asked that question, Scott. So there will definitely be a long-term consequence to that, especially within the community. A lot more wedge between the sub communities, not only with gay men, whether people think they're too attractive or they're not attractive enough to start an OnlyFans. And hey, however you make money that's legal and you are good at it and you feel comfortable, I'm a big proponent of you do you, just be as authentic as possible and just be safe. That's the dad in me as I'm getting older, is just do it safely and legally, please. But I think there will be wider wedges driven between the community, especially, as I said, with gay men, but also maybe the trans community or, people of color that are also in the community. But it's working for now. And I predict it will eventually burst, and we need more authenticity within our community itself when it comes to going online to sell yourself as a personal brand. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and as far as authenticity goes, are you have a lot of these guys, do we have people technically queer baiting, or do we have them just knowing their market, knowing their audience? How would you kind of define that?
It's both. I mean, I think somebody that may be bisexual, which again, zero judgment. I'm also becoming less naive, working on my internalized homophobia and, educating myself on the rainbow, essentially, right, Scott? But there's a lot of queer baiting out there, but if that works and no one's doing anything illegal, then maybe be more mindful about your content. You know what I mean? Right. But also there was this, just really quickly, I know if we're running out of time, but there was a content creator that was queer that I've had followed for a while last summer, through the fall. Not going to name names, but I do want to call this out to the community in the sense where we have to take responsibility onto ourselves as older gay gentlemen, for the younger generations are coming out, or even for the community, as we're learning about ourselves and we're putting the mirror to ourselves, becoming less naive and spreading the love and the light of the rainbow within our community to feel safer around each other. So this influencer was creating really good content, body positivity, even safe acts, just being safe in the boudoir, if you will. But he came out with a video with another influencer that had gotten canceled about a year prior, and he didn't call attention to that. And that bothered me a little bit, and not to be a Karen or a super dad or a grandpa, but I did try to respectfully reach out to this person and just call to attention to maybe, not canceling his content or the one that he worked with, but just to be mindful about who he works with in the future, because people are watching. A lot of the younger gay gentlemen are looking to influencers for help. They're not coming out to their friends or even their parents or their families. They're looking to social media as a tool to feel comfortable and feel accepted. So, That's my
Well said.
soapbox.
No, well said. And like I said, it fascinates me because I'm just interested to see what's going on because these guys are making money hand over fist. You're hoping they're making good choices with it. You don't
Sure,
know what
always.
kind of. I mean, you're hoping they're not getting manipulated by all these agencies that are popping up that are having to rep them, and it's
I
just a
know.
whole in. It's an industry now, so it's going to be interesting to see how that rides out. So I appreciate you talking about that because I know
Sure,
it's
of course.
something that's not really talked about, but it's something that kind of fascinates me a little bit.
And we should talk about it
Let's
more too, in my opinion, Scott, as a whole.
super. All right, well, let's get into the books. I mean, I'm excited about this. We're going to get into your writing. You have 2 books under your belt. You have another one kind of in the hopper, so to speak.
I
They
do.
take place in New Orleans. I see some travel pics on your social media from there. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were we in love with New Orleans? Did New Orleans, making that the scene of your book, make you fall in love with New Orleans? Talk about this love for New Orleans you have.
Yeah, so back in high school, a closeted, Maven, I had always dreamed of going to New Orleans. I was, 15, 16 years old, dreaming of, for whatever reason, and I can't remember exactly when this, seed was planted in my mind. Maybe a movie or a show or, an author. Probably reading Anne Rice. She definitely wrote
Right.
her first few novels in New Orleans, which I have been to her house many times on the on tours, on self-guided tours.
We're on the
Um,
lanai having cocktails one day, but
just
I'll go into that
right
another
one
time.
day, that's my dream to have a house in New Orleans to just do my writing on the lanai with a French 75,
There you go. I
um,
love it.
and a cigar and maybe some bourbon and some friends around me, to party a little bit and celebrate. But
Right.
I had always dreamed of going to New Orleans Mardi Gras for whatever reason. I was a very young, teenager. And then I finally had the chance to go with my best girlfriend, Melinda. She's my manager, my muse, my best friend, my travel partner,
Nice.
and I always go with her to New Orleans. I've been 4 times. As of late, I went for my 40th birthday with the best party crew. I had the best time. It exceeded all my dreams. They all came true for my birthday, and everyone enjoyed themselves, which I'm so blessed and thankful for. But my first time was not. It was 2014, and I had $400 in my bank account. I had just left a job, and I survived. I got through. I had the most fabulous
Wow.
time. I came home with $200 in my bank account, no job lined up, just was you know, um, working through getting another job and freelancing and starting my social media journey. Um, but I fell in love. I was at this gay club called Oz off Bourbon Street,
Okay.
and I was, of course, uh, indulging, as you do in New Orleans, especially on Bourbon Street. But I had this internal vision while and an external mental vision with the lights flashing and all the go-go boys were dancing and the wrought iron balconies within this beautiful club. And I felt at home. It was calling me home. And it was
Wow.
this is very stereotypical, but I'm okay with that. It was during Break Free by Ariana Grande that I had this vision of what the book should really be. My
Wow.
first book. And I came home and I got to writing and I finished it about within 2 years after getting back from New Orleans for the first time. And
That's
I have
crazy.
been back since. I have been inspired many times over by the city of New Orleans. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, were you always drawn to the horror genre? Do you knew that was going to write about, or did New Orleans just have such that presence and that supernatural witchy feel to it that that kind of gravitated your writing towards there? What was the
both
draw to horror?
both, again, um horror for me is a form of escapism. From I was telling you earlier, from a very early age, late 80s, early 90s. But New Orleans itself has a very different feeling, a very, heavy feeling that is not spooky necessarily, but there's history there. You can go on a ghost tour or a history tour and learn about the folklore that is very prominent, prominent and prevalent within the city itself, and that sticks with most people, and that's what I really brought home the first time. That led me to go back several other times to not only enjoy my time with my friend and to promote my projects, but to be inspired for the next novel going forward.
That's great. I love that. Now we have three books, potential third book, and the first one, Voodoo Juice, back in 2017.
Here it is.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hold it up again
Okay.
for me. There you
I
go.
had
I
it ready
like that.
for you. Some props. Here's the first,
I
my first
like it.
baby. Thank you.
Very
Yeah.
cool. So we have the very first one, um, 2017. You said it took you a while to write each of these books.
It did.
Talk about your writing process. Um, what did you find came naturally to you, and what did you really have to work on?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it took 5 years for the first one, start to finish. I told you, well, actually, prior to going to New Orleans for the first time, I was with my partner um, on the shores of Myrtle Beach, and we had gone on ghost tours, and he's also into horror, like I am. So I was inspired by the folklore of South Carolina, the history of the South that I am still drawn to every single day, especially when I go visit New Orleans and also South Carolina myself. Um, but it started on the shores of this resort called Ocean Creek, where I actually have, my parents have a condo. I was
Nice.
drinking a bucket from the beach bar called Voodoo Juice, and that's what inspired the original story, where it was going to be set in the 90s, and it was kind of like a murder mystery kind of novel. Then I went to New Orleans a year later, and that's when everything hit, at Oz at the nightclub, where I had to come home and I was re-inspired. Um, but the process came pretty easily to me. I definitely work through in my prose and my writing things that I can't act out necessarily in real life. So it's a form of escapism. It's a form of writing, which is very cathartic to me to work through my own issues. As I said, is my internalized homophobia, but it's also a form of fantasy. So I enveloped myself in these characters that spoke to me. This, Riley Clark and his partner, Cody Shrine the third, which is the main character in my second book in the series. What I had to work on was refinement and trying to emulate, at least at first, because now I'm really finding my own voice with my third book,
Mm.
which is going to be a very personal experience, but also leaning towards the horror genre with vampires. Um, but I had to work on my prose and make sure that the tenses made sense and the grammar was correct. Even though I had been writing for years prior to starting my book, I had to make sure that it was marketable and that it included everybody, not just the gay community, Scott.
Right.
So
And that's what they say. I mean, they say most of writing is editing. I'm not, but it's all about the edit. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
sure.
And now I kind of looked at the third. You talked about the second book for a second. The first one, I like the time jump in it. You're talking about someone from the past that learns the ways of voodoo, and then you have someone from more of the future that kind of learns about this person in the past. So I love
Correct.
that kind of alliteration there.
Thank you.
What brought that? How did that come about?
A lot of science fiction. I worked for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction for about 2 years, so that was inspired, by that as well. A lot of horror movies, a lot of Skeleton Key with Kate Hudson, my favorite Southern-inspired Gothic movie. Horror movie about voodoo and just body snatching was also very intriguing to me, as an author. I said, oh my gosh.
Right.
Because don't we all, especially I think as gay men, want to maybe be somebody else as we're coming out and figuring out who we are? So that was very exciting to me to write about that. If you can experience it, of course, magic in real life, then go to your prose, go to your writing and live in the world of your characters, which was very intriguing for me. But I also have a love of the 18th century, especially in New Orleans, and that's where the time jump kind of started. But also all the tours I went on, and all my friends in New Orleans that actually came to my 40th birthday at the Kai's house, which was actually in my books. So I've really come full circle in my journeys of being an author.
Nice. And I've talked about a lot of times with a lot of guests. I mean, technically, we are characters ourselves until we come out. We're actually putting on an entire other persona before we come out, right?
Exactly.
So
You
that
really
kind of
do.
works both ways there. And the second book, still Voodoo Juice. This is, like you said, Origins, Cody's story. There we
Appreciate
go.
it.
Cody's story. I love that. So, as you said, you brought this character from the first book into the second book. Did that kind of come to you while writing the first book? It's like, wow, this guy has a lot more going on. We have to explore. Or did someone say, I want to know more about that character? How did the second book come about?
Both, Scott. I sort of a spoiler. So Cody survives, however he survives at the first book. At the end of the first book, and he wasn't done speaking with me. Authors love their characters, whether they torture them or they torture us. For the writer, themselves. But his story wasn't finished, and I was going into the Roaring Twenties, in 2020, and I needed to envelop myself in the history, learn more about the time and the rise and fall of the literature renaissance in the French Quarter in the 20s, which, by the way, only lasted for 6 months. Historically speaking, so that was intriguing to me, and the rise and fall of the flapper, and also prohibition when everything was illegal, but also so was being a homosexual, back in the 1920s, where everybody had to go to speakeasies and go behind closed doors. I had to write about that, not only for myself to work through my own business, but also for the community through the eyes of this character. And he also time travels, and he meets and he falls in love with this gorgeous voodoo practitioner, this voodoo god, in 1926, and that's where everything kind of re-unravels for these characters. So
Nice. Love that. And then I kind of saw a teaser of the third book. I don't know whether it's still true or not, but it was Voodoo Juice, The Final Sip. Was it planned as a trilogy the entire time, or is this something you want to wrap up to move on to something else, or why are we calling it The Final Sip possibly?
I was destroyed after finishing the first book, and I knew that these characters, because like they're my babies, they're my family, and I wrote and breathed life, and they breathed life into me in dealing with not only writing but also my past, and my traumas. So I wasn't quite done with them, even though I had tortured the heck out of them in every possible situation magically, and in their own worlds, both in the past and in the present and the future. I wasn't done. So I had planned on writing 2 books at first, and then I just had so much story to tell. They had so much more to tell me and teach me that I decided to make it a trilogy, which there may be a prequel in the future. There may be another one, but right now it's only going to be 3. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about that yet as an author. So
I like it. Truth in
yeah,
advertising. There you
yeah,
go.
pretty much.
That's exciting, though. I'm so excited to kind of to follow the path as this goes on here. What do you, like I said, we're going to finish up this third series. Do you find yourself still drawn to the New Orleans area? Do you see you want to go maybe outside the city, or what's on your storyboarding for the future?
As of right now, we're going with New Orleans full throttle. It is such an exciting, special city to me, especially after I came back for a week, for my 40th birthday, because I had always gone with my friend, my muse, my manager, Melinda is my number one travel partner, to the city. It's our city.
Right.
We had so many experiences, both haunted and full of love and gratitude, and just sharing these experiences as best friends. Um, but New Orleans slays me, Scott, and I probably will never not write about New Orleans, and I feel like I'm doing it a disservice, at least for me and for my soul, if I don't write about the city, because there's so much history that you can blend in these supernatural stories with.
I love that.
Yeah, I am in love
Well,
with New Orleans, and I always will be.
as it should be. I think that's fantastic. Well, I'm excited we got to meet you, Joe. I think you have a great story. You tell great stories, and we got to keep you coming back on the show because there's a lot we can learn as social media evolves about your writing and so many other things. Thank you for taking the time to be on the Left of Str8 Show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I would love to come back. Truly, thank
Let
you.
my listeners know where they can find your books and where they can find you on social media and maybe even your business if you want.
Sure. So the hard copies right now, I'm working on a new website, but you can order them directly by calling and placing an order with the Maven himself. 973-289-3517 is my business line. It's open 24/7. But you can find the ebooks on smashwords.com is Voudou Juice. The first one is available for free, download on all e-readers. The second one is on Smashwords and also on barnesandnoble.com for $3.99.
Oh, that's fantastic. Super duper.
you.
And where they can find you on social media if they want to get in touch with you to ask for
Sure.
a private tour of New Orleans,
Yeah,
or
right. I would love
if they need
that.
some
I would love to
tips.
quit my job and write itineraries. But you can follow me on Instagram at Joseph A. Federico and the hashtags Joseph A. Federico and the Marketing Maven. And that's my main platform.
Perfect.
But also, if you're looking for any kind of services, I'm not a hard sell, but anchors2duskpublishing.com is my business website for social media.
Amazing. Joe Federico, it's been my pleasure. Hold those two books back up again as we get ready to go here.
Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure speaking to you. Stay on the line for me, guys. We're going to do a special 5 questions with Joe. Look for that next week. You're listening to the Left of Str8 Show right here on the Left of Str8 Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to the Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website, www.leftofstraightradio.com, for contests and other news and information. See you next week.